I always try to behave, to be that girl. You say, she doesn't make any troubles. She doesn't have any problems. She's okay.
Today's episode is a classic story of parentification and a powerful look into what happens when a child becomes the glue holding a broken family together. Picture yourself at 10 years old. What were you doing then? Playing with friends? Learning multiplication tables? Watching cartoons? Now meet Constanza, a gentle, composed 24-year-old woman from Chile, who at just 10 years old became the emotional and physical caretaker for her entire family. Her mother was completely emotionally unavailable. Hard of hearing and withdrawn, she left Constanza without maternal guidance or nurturing. Her father, angry and increasingly isolated, stomped through the house and yelled at everyone. Her sister spoke unintelligibly and could only be understood by one person, Constanza. So, Constanza did what so many glass children do. Instead of angrily stomping, Constanza stepped up. She translated. She was the carer. She calmed the storms, and she disappeared into these roles. This is a journey of remarkable, quiet courage, of survival and self-awareness. And in the end, Constanza didn't give up. She chose life. This is her story. Welcome to the I See Glass Children podcast.
Me, Alicia Meneses Maples.
You're here. I am so happy to see you.
Her TEDx talk has set a global viral trend about glass children. She's helped millions of hurting glass children around the world feel seen. You've seen her on NBC, CNN.com, and countless online articles. Here is your host, Alicia Meneses Maples.
Welcome to the I See Glass Children podcast. This is the place where we boldly dig into all things related to the glass child experience. We own our stories without shame, we pursue our healing, and we claim our value independent of others' thoughts, feelings, or expectations. Because you are important to me, I have to give you a warning. Some of the things you hear on the I See Glass Children podcast may be triggering for you, especially if you experience childhood trauma and neglect. And while I will occasionally have mental health professionals as special guests, I am not a licensed therapist, and this podcast is never meant to be a substitute for a supportive and healing relationship with a professional counselor. I'm your host, Alicia Meneses Maples. I am a glass child, and I see you. Hello, everyone. This is Alicia Meneses Maples, and I want to welcome you to another episode of the I See Glass Children podcast. And I have a wonderful guest with me, Constanza. Constanza, will you introduce yourself to everyone, please?
Hello, everyone. My name is Constanza. Um, I'm from Chile, and my age is 24 years old.
I'm so glad that you agreed to tell your story on the podcast. Constanza, what made you say yes?
Well, I'm doing a research myself for my degree in college about glass children. I found you mostly in a TED Talk you did 2010, I believe. And that I think that was my biggest inspiration to start the investigation about glass childs because I consider one myself. And I think mostly in Chile, there's mostly none information about it. And I think it could contribute a lot. And I decided to share my story here too.
I'm so glad you did. So, Constanza, tell us a little bit about your sibling, brother, sister, diagnosis.
Yeah, so it's my middle sister. We are three. and she has Down syndrome. And recently, around um, 2018, uh, she was diagnosed with epilepsy. So right now, after all these years, considering the pandemic too, she has been practically in bed all the time because the type of crisis she has are convulsions, and sometimes she faints out of nowhere. So it's pretty delicate, the situation around her.
Wow. Constanza, when did you first understand that something was different about your sister?
Well, I'm the youngest of the three of us. And so I think it started around 6 years old, maybe seven, when everyone said, and it's a story everyone shares until today, that I was the only one that could understand her because her pronunciation was very bad. So most of the time, everyone was calling me to say, "Hey, Constanza, what is she saying? We can understand what's happening to her." Well, people flew around her and used me as a tool to comprehend what was she saying most of the time.
In a
I think that's yeah. Sorry.
You're fine. It sounds like you're describing to me like you were almost a translator.
Yeah, I think that also a good impact. I don't know if I said good. A big impact that happened is when my mom lost her parents, my grandparents, when I was around 10 years old, maybe. That this situation got deeper because I start to care for my sister most of the time, and I have to care for my mother too because she was very emotionally vulnerable. So it was difficult in that moment to think, okay, so I have to step up because the relationship between my parents wasn't exactly great, and it is great. It isn't great until today. Um, so I have to step up and help my siblings, help my mother to be a emotional support for them.
Mm. At 10.
I think yes.
10 años. Ah. So when you first mentioned that your grandparents had passed away, what I thought you were going to say is that things got better because maybe your mother had to take care of her parents, and so she had more free time after they passed. But it sounds like the opposite happened.
Yeah, something very common here. Well, I'm making assumptions, but the parents around tend to isolate themselves very easily. Especially considering that my mother has a loss of hearing, so she has to use I forgot the name.
Sign language?
Um, no, she speaks very fluid, and she has a aid for speaking.
Yeah. Hearing aid.
Yes,
Yes.
that's the thing. So um, that complicates the situation a little more because my dad has a very short temper. Um, so she isolates herself much more for that. The loss of hearing, the situation with my sister, with the loss of her parents, she ended up relaying a lot of emotional support on me.
Mm.
I remember that my oldest brother, who is 10 years older than me, um, had his own troubles. He was very isolated himself. And I think if I have to see the situation about glass children, he has another whole situation going on in his mind because he isolated himself, and I had to step up and be the one to support my parents. It was completely opposite, the situation between us.
Right. So at 10, let me back up. At 6, you are the translator for your sister. You're
Yes.
helping other people understand what she's trying to communicate. At 10, you are still translating for your sister, and
Yes.
you are having to take care of the emotional needs of your mother. And
Yes.
you are also, you said, taking even more care and responsibility for your sister. Constanza, if you don't mind, could you describe what that was like? So, for example, what were the additional responsibilities that you were taking care of for your sister at 10?
All right. So, my sister, the type of vision she has from the world, it's very different. She didn't understand right away what was happening about my mother. Why? Because my mother, um, she is from another city in Chile.
Mhm.
She had to go uh, to the funeral of my grandparents, um, and it was very close one from the other. So I had to comfort my sister when she wasn't there, when she couldn't understand why mom wasn't there for us. Um, Considering too that my dad had a lot of um, trauma in his life, in his childhood. So he was and he is trying to fix that cold attitude he had from practically all his life. He was very distant from us. And in that moment, it was also the problem of my brother, who was also very cold toward us. So I think in that moment, I had to be there to hug my sister, to comfort her, and to explain her while trying to also comfort myself because I also feel very lonely in those times. I had to comfort the situation. I had to be kind of like a peacemaker because my father and my brother didn't have the patience to make her understand what was happening. So uh, in all this trouble, in all this chaos, my mother had also the complication about her family. So it was a constantly use of my emotional intelligence and constantly understand that most of what I was feeling was for myself, and no one was there to make me understand why I was so anxious all the time, why I was so stressed, or why I thought uh,
Hmm.
I have to more mature so fast. Um, yeah, it was very difficult. I didn't have time for myself to process these feelings.
Right. And eh, I just want to comment. I want to reflect on what you've said and comment on what you've said. So you're 10 years old and I think in images. And so I kind of see in my mind these scenes of an angry father who is not warm, who is, as you said, who's cold, who's not empathetic, who's not understanding, who probably yells and shouts.
Yeah.
Yeah. And an older brother who is in those same patterns, of being
Yes.
cold and yelling and shouting and impatient, and a mother who is absent emotionally and absent physically, and a sister who doesn't understand, and you are coming in between to protect your sister from your father and your brother's outbursts. You are
Yeah.
taking on the responsibility of nurturing and comforting your sister, who's not your child, she's your sister. And who is comforting and nurturing Costanza?
In those moments, no one, because I didn't say anything. I didn't speak up. I thought my dad was constantly stressed about work, about the struggles of having a disabled kid in his life. Um, because both of them have never really processed the struggles and the acceptance of having a child with a disability. They None of them have endured that big punch or big shock that it is to change their whole expectation about their kids. So my dad was struggling with those worries. My mom was struggling with her worries about her family. My brother will never be there for me. So in my mind, I said, I can't put more pressure in anyone else. I can't do that for anyone else. My friends have their own problems. They don't need another person talking about her own struggles. My teachers at school never really put much attention on myself because I was very shy. I'm still shy, but I'm trying to correct that. Um, I was very introvert. I was very quiet as a student. I always tried to behave, to be that girl. You say she doesn't make any troubles. She doesn't have any problems. She's okay.
Mhm. And you weren't okay.
No, no.
You were 10, Costanza. Okay, we're going to pause and remember something really important. Constanza was a child. When a child becomes the emotional caretaker for everyone in their home, it forces them into a constant state of hypervigilance. They are always scanning the room, always bracing for the next outburst, always managing everyone's moods while burying their own. This is not maturity. This is trauma. It's what happens when the grown-ups aren't available and the child becomes the only one holding the family together. How is your family situation today? Are you living at home with your parents and your brother and your sisters
Yes,
still?
yes. We are still here, and I think after what happened with the epilepsy and the pandemic, it has made a very big impact in our lives negatively. Um, I never experienced, I never thought that college was going to be practically all my years here at home in my space where I have to be constantly aware of what was happening around. So it was incredibly stressing for me. Um, Also, I spent 18 years of my life with my sister, sharing the same room. My father considered that it was time to change, that I have my own space when I joined college, because he said it was rational for me to study alone in silence when I was in college. But all the time I was in school, I have to study around my sister, who is a very lively person. She enjoys to sing very loudly. She enjoys to be the center of attention around the others. Um, and I can't deny that that built a lot of resentment in my heart. Resentment that I try to talk and work on in therapy, because I'm in therapy, and it was all those struggles impacted to be today in this constant edge for like walking on eggshells around the house to guess what was going on, to guess how my mom is today, how my dad is today. If today my sister had a bad night, that means she maybe can have a tantrum, can maybe be a day with um, faints or struggles. And all that made me completely invisible around my house, because how can you put your own struggles as a kid, as a daughter, in your parents' life when they barely can hold themselves with the situation of my sister? Um, she also has a lot of energy trying to stand up for herself. She has weight problems. She is very obese, and we are trying to fix that. So last year she fainted once when she stand up alone, and she broke her ankle, and that meant going constantly to doctors, to go to checkups, and I have to be there because my mom with her problem of hearing, and my father who practically develops some sort of phobia to go out after the pandemic. Most of the time, I had to be like a second mother there, speaking with the doctors, trying to understand what was going to be the diagnostic. Um, it's what's happening today, because there's still some moments of weakness in my sister's life. So we have to go all over again to the doctors, to checkups. So I have to be there pushing the wheelchair. It's very stressful and exhausting.
Mm. I'm just quietly absorbing what you're saying to me and picturing you in this situation where you are a child and you have your own hurts and your own worries and your studies, and you don't have someone, an adult, who is there to help you learn how to develop, how to grow, how to study. I have a friend, for example, for contrast. I have a friend who has a teenage daughter, and her teenage daughter is taking college classes, and her teenage daughter w- wasn't really sure how to study for an exam. And so my friend sat down with her daughter and walked her through a whole study plan for this one final exam. They created note cards, they came up with questions. She went back and forth with her daughter, asking her questions to see if she had learned and what she needed to remember. These are things that are important for a child to develop, and your parents were perfectly content with allowing you to parent their daughter. And that makes me very sad for you. The other thing that I want to highlight for the people that are listening is this. Constanza didn't use this word, but it's hypervigilance. it is this inability, and don't let me put words in your mouth, okay, Constanza? So if I'm saying
Okay.
something that's not correct, tell me, okay?
All
But
right.
it's this inability to relax because
Yes.
we are always paying attention to every noise, every sigh, every shout, a footstep on the floor,
Absolutely.
what music is playing, if we're around people, what's happening with the body language, why did he look that way, why did she look that way? It's this constant state of alertness so
Yes.
that we can be prepared for, in my case, whatever explosion was going to happen, whether it was an explosion from my father or an
Yes.
explosion in terms of a meltdown from my brother, or if it was an explosion of tears and crying from my mother. It was just
Yes.
constantly watching and waiting. Is that
I completely agree with that. Um, Something I learned from very young age is learning what type of steps are going on outside. Because if my father he was angry, he stomps harder the ground. He walks faster. Um, if my brother has a bad day, he also stomps harder. If my mom was very sensitive in a moment, so she walks faster, for example, and stays isolated without letting someone else to know. And that completely freaks me out because when she was vulnerable, I needed to comfort her. I needed to make sure she was okay. It was completely difficult to relax, to stay, and to not be exhausted all the time because it was also constantly stressful around my home. Um, until this day, I feel exhausted even if I stay in my bed all day or if I do something that can brings me peace. I feel still a sense of guilt or exhaustion. It's very difficult and
so?
it's not easy to deal with.
No, it's not. So I want to highlight for our audience what you just said. That when Constanza does something for herself that brings her peace, she feels guilty. Why do you feel guilty, Constanza?
Because I think I have to help others all the time. Or if I'm not helping someone else, I have to do something productive. So, for example, my parents feel proud of me, feel like I'm doing something for myself. I can be independent of from them. Um, and it's a less problem if I have to say in some words for them to deal with. Um, I remember that right now doing my thesis, my investigation, there are moments of my meltdowns because I am diagnosed with depression and anxiety that I feel overwhelmed and I need to stay silent for some time My parents notice this stuff, and they come over to check on me to ask why I'm not working, what's going on. So it's kind of start all over again, though, with that feeling of guilt. You know, it's it's like I can feel pleasure on giving me myself a treat, something to enjoy.
Because you have been trained that your life is not about you. Your life is about everybody else and taking care of everybody else. You've learned that your needs are less important than everyone else's needs. And it sounds to me like you have an internal belief system, which most adult glass children have, that is your value and your worth is tied to your productivity and performance.
Yes, yes, completely.
So,
It's
oh, go ahead.
no, no. I was gonna agree with you, actually.
I wish that life was this simple, that I could say some words and everything would change. But I want to say some things to you, okay? I want to
Okay.
speak some truth over you and your life, all right? Your purpose on this planet is not to take care of everyone else.
Sorry.
Your job is not to put everyone else ahead of yourself. Your value, hear me on this one, Constanza. Your value and your worth do not come from how well you perform, how productive you are, how happy you make other people. Your value comes from the fact that God created you and He loves you, regardless of what you do or you don't do. That is where your value comes from. You are a beautiful human being designed by God.
Thank you.
And one day, if you decide that you are not going to be a mother to your sister, that's okay. And I believe that all of us have the right to have a life as independent human beings. And we get to choose. We get to choose what, if any, role we play in our siblings' lives. Your brother has chosen, right? Your mother has chosen. Your father has chosen. You also have the right to choose, in my opinion.
It's easier to say than actually make the decision.
Yes. Yes, it is. I understand. I am many, many years older than you are. And I am still working on these things. So I wanted to speak some truth to you. And then I also want to ask another question. You said that you are in therapy. That's a big decision. What occurred in your life that made you say, I'm going to go get help for myself?
Therapy started around 12 years old, I think. Um, I gave up on therapy when I was in school. Um, I thought that maybe it wasn't for me to share my stories with someone else because I was very scared that someone was going to say to me that this environment was wrong, this place was bad for me, you know. I remember that when I was for the first time in a with a psychiatrist, she didn't have exactly the most tender way to say to me what was going on in my head. I remember she mentioned it bluntly in front of my mother too, that I had chronic depression. I think that's the word. I'm not very sure if that diagnosis was correct because I came back to therapy on 2020. I think that's the year where started the pandemic. So I was going through a very bad time emotionally because my mind and my actions said that I didn't have any purpose, that I couldn't keep going, that even if I tried the most hardest I could to work for myself, to build and be a productive adult, I didn't saw any hope in my life. I didn't saw any worth in it. So when my mind started to feel numb about everything around, about some stuff that I used to enjoy, like video games, for example, or reading, I thought in that moment that it was therapy or start to go through a very dangerous path. I took the decision for myself, I think. Even with the comments of my parents, because my dad thought in that moment that therapy was a waste of time, a waste of money, that adults have to resolve their own problems alone, that therapy was for kids or for crazy people. That was my dad's opinion about therapy. He has changed that opinion with time. He has understood by his own reactions about life that therapy is not just for crazy people. Um, I went to therapy to help myself, and I then went to a psychiatrist because I've always believed that aside from all the problems in my family, there was something else wrong with me because I couldn't understand nothing in the same way that others did. In school, for example, I had a very difficult time to learn, to study, to process things, information about anything. And recently, after 1 year with a psychiatrist, he told me I have ADHD. And it was a huge impact in my life because she also mentioned it that I had the strength even when everyone said to me that I was fine, that I was normal. I still believe that something was wrong with me because why everyone else could be or work so efficiently and my mind couldn't, you know? And my parents didn't have the time to put any focus on that, you know?
I'm pausing for what Constanza just revealed because it matters. Many glass children get missed on having their own diagnoses. And Constanza received an adult diagnosis of ADHD. Why is this significant? Because all her life she was told that her worth was in her performance and how productive, how responsible, and how efficient she could be. But she was struggling with ADHD. She was trying to be perfect in a brain that worked differently. And every time she couldn't keep up, she didn't blame the circumstances. She blamed herself. Imagine the pressure of caretaking for your sister, your mother, your entire family, while also battling your own mind, telling you you're never enough. This diagnosis gave her clarity, but it came late. And it didn't undo the years of silent self-criticism.
So I felt very pride for myself because I kept fighting for that, you know?
I'm so proud of you.
Okay.
I'm so proud of you. So really, the thing that prompted you to go into therapy is you were looking at the choice of living or the choice of dying. You
Yeah.
were looking at, do I commit suicide or do I choose life? Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah. And Constanza, you chose life. In the middle of all this pain, in this sea of hopelessness, when the people who were supposed to be taking care of you were discouraging you and were not there for you, you chose life. I'm so proud of you.
Thank
Yeah. So you've been incredibly brave in sharing your story and in telling the world who you are. And I still have more questions. So
Let's get going.
I think that what is challenging for the world outside of high needs families, okay? If glass children, we get it, right? But for the rest of the world, I think what's challenging for them to understand is that we look okay. We
Yes.
we look like we're fine. We tend to be very good at anything that we attempt to do, school or sports, academics, any of those things. We don't complain. We don't talk about what's happening in our home. So it's hard for people to understand that we actually have problems. And what's harder for them to understand, and one of the reasons why I'm doing this podcast, is how the way we grew up actually affects us in adulthood. So I would like to ask you that we've talked some about that, but I'd like to ask you if you would be willing to share how the way you grew up has impacted you as an adult.
Well, I think that sometimes when I reflect on my past, um, I see a kid who had to grow up very fast and now an adult that actually has no idea what she's doing. That I first start as an overachiever in college. I was so happy that whatever I was doing, I had good grades. I had good productions. But then I'm not exactly to which point. I think it was with a teacher who was very hurtful around me, broke my whole spirit, and it crumbled down to a point that I don't know what I'm doing with my life. I feel completely lost because everything I learned was to revolve around others. And now everyone is telling me that now you have to think about yourself, about your own choices. And I hate that because right now I would love that someone tells me what to do because most of the time I have no idea what to do.
It's almost like in non-high needs families, right? The parent is teaching the child how to be an adult, how to be independent, how to make good decisions, how to fail, how to make mistakes, how to recover from mistakes. Like that is part of parenting. And you and I and many other glass children, we missed out on that. So all of a sudden, we're in the world and we don't know what to do.
Yeah, yeah, I agree totally in that. Um, it's overwhelming, the situation. Sometimes I feel like even going to a grocery store, I get lost, or I can do things by myself. But something I've noticed that it's very strange, I think, is that every time I'm with my friends, my closest friends, I can do anything. I can speak with others because I have problems with social anxiety. But when I'm with my friends, it's like I get brave, I get eloquent, I get supportive. It's like when I'm doing something for other person, I can do it. I can work on it. I can be efficient. I can be almost like a superhero if they need to. But if it's something that I have to do for myself, I have no clue what I'm doing. I get completely lost and hopeless, I think, or motivate. I don't have the energy to do things for myself. It's exhausting and it's almost sad for myself that it's like I am my own enemy in these situations.
It I can relate to what you're saying, and there are times that I feel like if I'm sacrificing myself to take care of other people, then I can't win. But if I sacrifice other people to take care of myself, I can't win. And there are times that I feel like no matter what I do, I can't win. I'm doing something wrong.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very difficult.
I know that everybody's going to want to know, Constanza, um, are you getting good help from your therapist?
Yes, I am. I'm putting all my efforts to get better, to be better and kinder with myself. Um, so yeah, it's like one of the few things I do for myself that I put all my efforts on.
Mhm. I'm so glad. And you said something that I want to talk about, which is you said that you're working on being kinder to yourself. I would love for you to talk about that because that may not make sense to people who are not glass children who are listening. Like, what does that mean? Why does Constanza need to work on that? Can you explain?
Well, all my life growing up in this environment made me understand that most of my stuff that make me feel happy or joyful, I had to do something else to compensate those things. Like, for example, if I went out for going to a sleepover with my friends or prefer to play video games instead of studying, I thought, all right, so I have to do this and then work extra hard to compensate the lost time that I wasn't doing something productive. Or sometimes when I feel overwhelmed about life or about something specific, I treat myself very badly in my mind. I think I I put negative thoughts in my head about that you can waste time on recovering from a breakdown, you know? You have to keep going because there's no time for you to breathe. So I need to remind myself daily that there is time for me to breathe. There is time to be slow, to take my time on stuff, you know? Or sometimes when I really want to stop whatever is causing me stress, I force myself to keep up, you know? Or if I'm outside my comfort zone, I assume that everyone else needs me to be good about it, on my behavior, on my actions. So I never think anything positive for me. There's no space for me to be positive about myself.
And you're learning in therapy to make space to be positive for yourself?
Yeah, my therapist constantly reminds me that not everything that revolves around me that it's a problem, it's my fault. No, I'm not here to take responsibility on situations that I didn't start, that I didn't cause, you know? Um, I'm not there to be the lifesaver of the struggles of another situation in my friends or not even my friends. Sometimes another student that I see struggling, I take my whole time to help them, you know? And I tend to isolate myself to avoid being a superhero, you know? It's like I can't do a middle point in between.
Yeah. That's powerful. What you just shared is so powerful, and I love it. It's not your responsibility to fix problems that you had nothing to do with creating. That's
Yeah.
beautiful. That's beautiful. And how often we need to remind ourselves of that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, Constanza, two last questions. Actually, maybe three. Um, what advice do you have for parents who have a child who is high needs and a child who is not?
I think that they maybe need to understand that they also can be vulnerable, but with the right people, not with their kids, because it's okay to be vulnerable, maybe with other friends or maybe with a therapist asking for help for this situation. It's very good. Um, I think also be more patient, more or kind to them and themselves, because I think no one in this context it's it has to take the blame of what is suffering everyone around. I think everyone needs to be kind to themselves, to seek for help, to learn the that this situation they are living, it's not normal, but it's easy to learn to be good about it. I think I'm kind of mixing up, but what I'm trying
You're
to say is get help.
get help. Like, it's okay for parents to get help. They need
Yeah,
to help they need to help themselves, is what you're saying. Yes.
yeah,
Because here's what happens to the audience who's listening. Like, what Constanza has described about her life is, there's a lot, but one thing in particular right now is there's something called parentification. And we think of parentification as when a parent gives a child adult responsibilities that are too heavy and too much for that child to bear. And we can see that that's happened. I mean, clearly with Constanza's life, she was the parent to her sister. The other part of parentification that we forget about, and Constanza touched on, we didn't really dig into, is parentification can happen from the child to the parent, where the parent shares too much with the child, where the parent makes their child responsible for their emotional well being and happiness, where the parent shares too much about problems in their marriage, problems with finances, their own depression or mental and emotional issues with the child. That's not a child's responsibility to bear either. And so, parents, if you find yourself oversharing with your child, that's a sign that you need to get help for yourself someplace else, because that's not your child's responsibility. And if you continue to perpetuate that behavior with your child may end up in a situation like Constanza and so many other glass children, where they hit adulthood and are lost and don't know what to do. Mm.
I would like to add something else that I think it's something important they have to understand, that if we see our parents doing good, we feel good about it. If we see them suffering, if we see them constantly angry or worried, we also feel like that. We also feel like something can't be right around, and we don't understand why, you know?
We take, as children, we take our cues from our parents, right? We look
Yes.
to them to understand what's happening in the world around us. We look to them to understand how we're supposed to feel. That's brilliant. I'm so glad that you said that, because yeah, it's spot on. Constanza, what do you want the world to understand about glass children?
That even if when we are share our stories around the world, we don't do this to be treated like glass or something fragile. We do this to make them understand that we struggle, that we are trying constantly to remind ourselves that we are our own person, that we have to endure a lot of pressure, but we want to have normal days, normal lives, to enjoy freely our own pleasures, um, to experience what others can't experience, but without judgment, without the fear to feel criticized, without feel like if I say something wrong in my story, someone else is gonna be there to say that's bad. You shouldn't have said that. It's about being respectful and understand that even if we don't have the same suffering as our own siblings, we also struggle. We also want to feel kindness, to feel like we are doing whatever we are doing correctly, and we are allowed to make mistakes, to learn about them. I think that, and send a big hug to them. If I could, I would give you a big hug through the screen and every glass child, because we need that comfort. We need that gentle touch.
Yes, I do know. And I take that hug and I hug you back. So are you glad you shared your story today?
Yeah, I think I am, even if I kind of ended up saying it was bad, because sometimes in my mind, when I share something vulnerable, I tend to regret that. But I convince myself that this is going to be good for everyone, not to seek something very knowledgeable, like something for a study, I mean. But if this story can be helpful for at least one person to think, wow, she's living the same stuff I'm living too, I think that is totally worth it for me.
Constanza, thank you. Thank you for
And thank you.
you're welcome. You here you are sharing your story. You're being courageous by being visible. You are talking about things that are difficult and deeply personal. And I'm so grateful. And I believe that it is our stories that are going to change the world and are going to change the future for younger generations of glass children. So thank you for being with me today.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity.
Constanza's story is not loud. It doesn't come with dramatic outbursts or obvious trauma markers, but it is devastatingly clear. At 10 years old, she became the translator, the peacekeeper, the emotional sponge. She took care of her sister's physical, medical, and emotional needs, her mother's grief, her father's rage, and she did it all while trying to go to school, trying to study, trying to stay alive. And now in her 20s, Constanza is still holding it all together, all by herself. But here's the part that matters most. She hasn't given up. She's choosing therapy. She's learning about ADHD. She's finding her voice, not just as a caretaker, but as Constanza. Her story is a wake-up call to all of us. Parentification is not responsibility, it is emotional theft. It takes a child's sense of safety, autonomy, and identity and replaces it with duty. If you are that child, now grown, still caretaking, still wondering when it's your turn, let Constanza's story be a soft invitation that you matter too. You are not selfish for needing rest. You're not broken because you're tired. And you are not wrong for finally wanting to put yourself first. Constanza chose life. You can too. How are you feeling? Remember, if you're struggling, reach out to a mental health professional. You do not have to do this alone. Thank you for being with me today, and don't forget to share this episode with your bestie, your therapist, your teachers, your minister. Sharing is caring, and hearing is healing. This is the I See Glass Children podcast. I'm Alicia Meneses-Maples, and I see you. God sees you, and Jesus loves you.